Welcome to our experimental roundtable on climate storytelling. My name is Lisa Clarkson. I'm the Executive Director of Business and Rights and Production Sustainability at CBC. I have to confess, I have a bit of a hoarse voice from shouting, "Go Jays!" or "No Jays!" So hopefully you bear with me, but I am going to be one of your moderators for today, along with Liz Shorten. CBC is just so excited to co-host this experimental roundtable on climate storytelling with CMPA. The idea for this roundtable came from a conversation which Liz and I had this summer about what are the ways we can learn from each other about climate storytelling. So there's just so much innovative work that's going on in this space, and we'd had some success with producer roundtables in the past for COVID and for sustainable production. And my confession is that it was really listening to Tracy Jardine and Ryan Camperman, who you'll hear from this afternoon, and they were talking about the mechanics, the process of how they approached climate storytelling in This Hour is 22 Minutes. And I thought that this is something that everyone should hear, would want to hear. Just a few definitions. What do we mean when we say climate storytelling? We're taking a really broad approach to climate storytelling. It is really anything that is in front of the screen, on the screen. So that might mean dialogue, that might mean a character storyline, that might mean the entire plot, that might mean the backdrop of where the action is taking place. All of those things can be climate storytelling for the purposes of our discussion today. What climate storytelling is not is sustainable production. So not how you produce something behind the screen in a carbon efficient way. It is what audiences see in front of the screen. So we have framed this session as a roundtable, and we're really hoping for your involvement and participation and to hear what your stories and experiences are. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a lineup of what's to come. You do have an agenda in your Eventbrite invitation, and we will post it in the chat. But here's the lineup of what you can expect. First, we're going to start with Elsa Takanuga of CBC, who's going to kick us off with a bit of a tour of some storytelling tools that you can use right now. So Elsa's going to go first. Then we're going to hear from Sandra Kleinfeld and Leslie Burchard, who are with CBC in the Nature of Things. And they're going to talk to you about what climate storytelling looks like from the broadcaster's perspective. And then, drum roll, it's the centerpiece of what this session is all about. We've got 5 producer segments, which are going to be kicked off by a phenomenal producer or production team that will talk about this climate storytelling work that they've done. So those 5 categories are comedy, drama, factual, entertainment, docs, and kids. So a phenomenal producer is going to kick us off, and then we're hoping that you will chime in with your stories and or raise your hand to ask a question. We got loads and loads of questions in advance, so I'm going to try and keep us going during that segment after the phenomenal producer has talked with some of the questions you've asked. If you do have more questions, boom, put them in the Q&A and I'll read them out. If you've got an example that you want to share of climate storytelling in a particular genre, boom, put your hand up and I'll call on you and you can raise that live. So that's how we're going to try and organize it. Might be a bit chaotic, which can be fun. So questions in the Q&A, I'll read those out. If you have an example that you want to share, put your hand up and I'll call on you. So that's how we're going to run it. And then at the end, We're going to have an overall discussion. If there's anything that has been missed, if there's anything that has been unsaid. And I think as part of that, we're going to hear a little bit from Producing for the Planet and what they're working on. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Liz.
Thanks, Lisa. Hey everyone, I'm Liz Shorten, the Chief Operating Officer of the CMPA. And yes, it was some scheming that Lisa and I did a few months ago that got us all here today. And really excited to co-host with the CBC this roundtable on climate storytelling. I'm fortunate to be the staff lead for sustainability and climate action for the CMPA. And in that role, I get to work with some amazing members who are doing great things in this area, and some of them are participating today. I want to first acknowledge that the stewards of the land of where I'm participating from today, the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh Nations, and we offer sincere gratitude for their stewardship of the land and their legacy as the original storytellers. All of us at the CMPA have actually taken the PACT course offered for free by Jennifer Podemski's Shine Network. And I would encourage all of you, if you have not taken the course, it was designed specifically for our industry to improve our Indigenous cultural competency. As Lisa mentioned, this is to be a roundtable. It's not a Zoom meet. It is a Zoom meeting. Sorry, it's not a webinar. We really encourage you to share ask your questions and share your experience. Here's some housekeeping. Okay, we are recording the meeting so we can share it afterwards with people who couldn't join us. Okay, so here's some tech thing. I'm going to repeat this. So for optimal viewing, we're encouraging you to click the view button in the top right-hand corner of the meeting window, and a pop-up with a drop-down menu will appear. And if you select the side-by-side speaker or side-by-side mode and check the box to hide non-video participants, that's kind of a way of focusing on the speakers, which may help. And if you have any other technical issues, don't contact me because I'm kind of useless. Send a message to our co-hosts, Natasha and Natalie, and they can support you with any tech, and they'll do their best. And finally, the scope here is climate storytelling and, trying to share our experiences in that area. And we really want us to focus on that. So let's keep our comments on that topic, and please be respectful. So it's a safe learning space for everybody. Okay, I think we're ready to go, and I'm going to turn it back to Lisa. I'm kind of acting as the moderator, so I may kind of swoop in at some point and say, hey, we're kind of getting out of time here. So that's kind of my role, but and Lisa's going to ask the questions and move things along. So back to you, Lisa.
Amazing. So here we go. This is what we're going to sort of do just to start with to really get you involved in thinking about your own experiences with climate storytelling. We are going to ask you 3 questions. And also for the panelists, you can sort of see, what the experience is in the room, and to the extent that you can incorporate any of these elements into your comments, that would be great too. So we're going to start with the first question, and that is, have you ever tried to incorporate climate storytelling into your content? You can see the answer or the poll up, I hope. We'll wait for a few seconds, but pop your answer in. We've got about 120 people who have joined us, so we'll just wait for a few seconds. Sort of interesting is that there's lots of people who've done it between 2 and 4 times and always. Love it. Amazing. Okay. This will stay up, so I think you can answer the 3 questions if you haven't had a chance to answer the first one. But I'm going to quickly move on to the second question here. Oh, I forgot. You're all producers and you're way ahead of me because I see you're already answering them. So the second one, just to read it out, what approaches have helped you to integrate themes into your stories. And I see information from the news is sort of out front there as the leader. Examples from other producers. Hooray, this is what we're all about here at this meeting. Sustainability checklist is another one. And then if you do have something else, we're really trying to keep track and understand what's helpful for people so we can support you better. And then the final question is, what stopped you from integrating climate themes into your stories? And we have a few answers that are out there. Don't have enough knowledge is one. Another, doesn't feel authentic. Don't know how to get started. And then there's also another category there if you want to answer it. So with that quick poll done, thank you very much for thinking about your own experience and helping us understand where you are. I am going to introduce Elsa Takanuga. Elsa is CBC's environmental sustainability lead, and she's going to talk us through some climate storytelling tools that exist and tell us where we can easily find them. Elsa.
Thanks, Lisa. And thanks everyone for participating, not only just coming here, but also participating in the poll. It was very interesting seeing the results coming in, and hopefully this whole roundtable can help us all better integrate it and feel more confident in understanding that climate storytelling can be put in authentically into any story that we're sharing. So yeah, thanks so much again for joining. So although Lisa briefly touched on what climate storytelling is and what climate storytelling isn't, I want to quickly go over in a bit more detail what exactly it is and how we can apply it to so many things. So can we go to the next slide, please? So often we interpret climate storytelling as a story about the climate or about nature, or a story that is educational or preachy, or one that can help induce fear about the climate crisis. In the next hour or so, you'll discover all of the different kinds of climate storytelling. It can show up in any storyline in any genre. Educational stories about the climate are just one aspect of climate storytelling. So due to the huge scope of climate storytelling, there are many definitions, but one that I like is the art and science of communicating the complexities of climate change and sustainability through compelling narratives on screen. So this to me means that we're aiming to get creatives to see their work through a climate lens, which is using climate change as a lens through which to imagine any aspect of a story. These can be character motivation, set design, conflict, love, humor, regardless of the primary genre. It encompasses several dimensions that you'll be able to see or that you can right now see on my slide here. I won't speak to each of them, but in a nutshell, climate storytelling helps reflect the world as we're currently experiencing it. So one, grappling with the climate crisis, and it demonstrates to us that other real people are impacted, allowing us to understand that we're not alone. It offers stories to help us navigate the realities of the climate crisis and helps us to understand the solutions, or that solutions and problem solving are being implemented now, today, and here. Okay, so hopefully we're primed for what climate storytelling is and the potential impact that we as an industry have in changing the course of the climate crisis. But would Canadian audiences actually want this? So can we go next, please? Every year, we get our research team to ask Canadians exactly this. So these are some of the results from the last 2 years. As you can see here, about 60% of Canadians are alarmed and concerned about climate change. So we know that the issue exists, and we know that it's urgent and severe. However, at the same time, climate change comes in as the 10th most important issue facing Canadians. So today, and understandably so, Canadians are more concerned with daily issues like cost of living and tariffs and housing. So one of the questions that we as creatives can ask ourselves is, how can we connect climate change to our daily issues? How can we reframe climate change as an issue that impacts Canadians' top concerns, rather than framing it as a political and an issue in the distant future? Next, please. So we can see here that audiences are tired of being shown the same problem. I saw in the poll that many of you answered that a lot of you were inspired about integrating climate change into your stories through the news. And that's great. But audiences are also looking for new frames and positive reinforcement. So you can see here that around 60% of Canadians think that there are not enough positive stories about the climate, and that 40% feel powerless about what they can do to protect the environment. So this means that we want to hear solutions and we want to see solutions to environmental issues, and we want to know what we can do to help, and we want to be shown the actions that are possible. We can't play a role in creating change if we don't believe that change is possible. So let's help our audiences truly feel and understand that change is possible, and that they can be a huge part of it. Next, please. So here are some supporting online tools to help you get started in your climate storytelling journeys. There's so many tools, as you can see, and that's just a small percentage of them. Although there isn't an official comprehensive directory of sustainability suppliers in Canada, currently there are many resources and suggestions that are given on many of these links that you can see. The Real Green and Ontario Green Screen are great places to start. Good Energy, as you can see here, has an incredible wealth of resources. They've developed an entire playbook to help you through examples of climate storytelling and scientific data to support it. And they've come up with something called the Climate Reality Check. So really gives you a lot of tools and resources to understand how to implement climate storytelling into your stories. So I'm also Lisa mentioned that quite a few of the audience members had submitted some questions before, which was fantastic and really shows the interest in a roundtable like this. So I just want to answer a couple of these questions to show that we looked at them and we really value them. So one of them was asking how to get started in development. So my biggest tip is to start thinking about how to implement sustainable actions as soon as possible. These can be actions both on and off screen. But since we're talking about climate storytelling on screen, sustainability actions, I'll focus on that. So to help with this, CBC has a resource called the Sustainable Checklist for Projects in Development. So on here, we have elements to consider for green storytelling, which are ideas to show on screen. Within that checklist, we also have a list of elements that we encourage you to try to not show on screen unless it's absolutely necessary for the story arc. So this was developed to help productions think about their sustainability actions before the project even begins. Another question was to do with the Albert calculator. So for those of you who don't know, Albert is a calculator that was developed specifically to measure production's environmental impacts. So the question was, how can we balance fulfilling the requirements of the Albert calculator with our creative and budgetary needs? So this was important to address as it seems to operate under an assumption that if you're looking at and measuring your carbon emitted during production, it will have a negative impact on your production. But I want to assure you that that's not true, as Albert can often help you make more efficient and cost-saving decisions. In particular, with climate storytelling, Albert can give you suggestions for how to better implement climate storytelling in your content. It suggests and it doesn't require. So finally, the last question that I wanted to address was how to think about climate storytelling in the context of the poly crisis, which is all the other interconnected global challenges that we're facing today. So climate change is a threat multiplier, which means that it exacerbates pre-existing vulnerabilities and tensions and can trigger or amplify other global challenges. So using this understanding of climate change, we can shift the narrative from a single environmental issue to a systemic web of interconnected crises. So for example, a character's health issues are exacerbated by rising heat or air pollution. A drought makes small farmers come together to try to find a solution to their livelihoods. Using the climate change, we can link the climate crisis to all the other issues faced in the world today. So with that, I'm going to thank you so much for your time again. And please reach out if you want any more support with any tools or suggestions into how to implement climate storytelling into your productions, I'd be super happy to talk about it and to direct you to more tools and sources. So with that, I'll pass it off to Sandra Kleinfeld and Leslie Burchard, who will speak to climate storytelling from a broadcaster's perspective.
Hi, thanks, Elsa. I'm going to start and be fast and then hand it over to Leslie. I think, as most people know, that a lot of our climate change stories and storytelling generally live in, I oversee CBC docs, and they generally live in the nature of things strand, whether they're full docs devoted to an aspect of that subject, or it's woven into almost all the docs that aren't on the nose kind of climate change docs. But Leslie will talk more about that. And I'll just say that, elsewhere at CBC Docs, we're not overtly, like specifically asking for specific climate change stories or docs. But if we're pitched something that includes it or is about it, we're happy to consider it. It has to meet all our other and usual criteria for docs, but we're certainly happy to review those. And I'm sure most people are familiar with our independent producers site, cbc.ca/independent producers, which if you go there, and it has all our content and commissioning language. And I'll just quickly touch on my colleagues in factual entertainment. I can tell you also they're not looking for entertainment shows that are about climate change, but where possible in our factual shows, there are, I mean, also referred to this, there are ways that we can include on screen elements that certainly telegraph an awareness and practical steps in trying to combat climate change, but it obviously has to feel authentic. I mean, from the simplest thing, in Dragon's Den, the dragons have water on their side tables, and we make sure they're in glasses. I mean, that's just the simplest example. In a new show that we have called Locals Welcome, it's with food journalist Suresh Das, who's exploring cultural communities in Canada through food. He travels in a vehicle, and it has hybrid and electric features. Now, that was part of a sponsorship, and that's the car that the sponsor wanted to highlight. But nevertheless, there's that. We had an episode of Still Standing about how climate change is impacting a community, Lennox Island in PEI. I mean, essentially, I think they said like a quarter of the island has eroded. But again, all the usual filters for selecting a place to go for Still Standing applied. And I wanted to just make just an observation about docs in general, and in line with what Elsa had suggested, there is a kind of visual sequence that gets used a lot in docs of various kinds, and that is a character in a doc gets into a car and drives somewhere. And I think that's one area that I would love to see a little bit more imagination if that sequence is, germane to the narrative, or if they're going to a specific place and there's stakes around the trip, then I understand it. But just because it's a visual that has a character doing something, and I know you need to shoot the characters doing something, I would just love to see potentially thinking through potential other ideas. So I'm going to stop talking now and hand it over to my colleague Leslie Burchard, who oversees the nature of things.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you. Thanks, Sandra. I'm Leslie Burchard, and as Sandra said, I oversee the nature of things, a show that's been at the forefront of climate storytelling for 65 years. Telling stories about climate and nature and wildlife has always been a part of my life. Just like one of our hosts, Sarika Cullis Suzuki, I grew up with a dad who was always teaching and testing me about things we'd see on our drives and our hikes. My dad's a retired outdoor education teacher and a conservationist, and he'd stop the car at night when we were passing swamps and test us on what owls and frogs we were hearing. Sarika's dad would stop to pick up roadkill so that they could take it home, dissect it, and have a biology lesson. My dad would strap a backpack on his back with a tape recorder full of toad calls and a globe and do the spring graduation speakers tour, teaching kids about how to appreciate and love nature and protect our planet. Sarika's dad became the David Suzuki, and he spread the word through being an activist and host of The Nature of Things, which, of course, my dad and I watched together for many years. So it's very full circle that Sarika and I are working together now, along with the fabulous Anthony Morgan, our other co-host, to make people fall in love with the natural world and want to protect it. Something the three of us all have in common is that we love all the little details in nature and think that the more audiences understand the crazy ways the world works, the way science works, the way nature works, the more the audience will want to protect it too. I just wanted to share a few highlights from The Nature of Things that show some of the ways in which we're approaching telling some of those stories. So we'll roll the trailer.
So, Anthony, we have been co-hosting The Nature of Things for a few years now. Things have changed a lot.
Yeah, Georgia had hair back then.
Yeah.
How's it been for you?
I have been loving it. This job is incredible. We get to take the most amazing stories about the most world-changing ideas.
And poor diet is the leading cause of early death on Earth.
I have to say that is the least I've ever enjoyed one of those.
I mean, it really is incredible. We get to go to the forefront of where this amazing research is taking place.
The hardest part for sure is feeling the heat on my arms. It feels like I'm almost in an oven.
We get to interview scientists and knowledge holders and people who are working out there every single day on these fascinating stories.
It's pretty spectacular. I can't believe we get to do it and to share it with the world.
What's happening? Am I in a dream right now?
If I gave you the option to take a pill to erase a bad memory of a breakup, would you take it?
I remember the highs being so high and the lows being crushingly low. Did you experience that too?
Oh goodness, so many hormones.
I'm very grateful that you're sharing this with us because it's I know it's tough. So
I figured might as well go all the way. Some people are too afraid to talk about it.
Every little single thing that happens in the ecosystem has its effects on animals. Yeah, everything's related.
when you think about the fact that our planet is getting hotter and that these kinds of conditions are going to become more commonplace, it really makes you wonder how people would be able to cope.
And if I devote my life to fighting for that future, that maybe there will be a different future for them.
2, 1.
Yeah!
Good job.
Ew. Oh, went up my arms.
And yes, in that last clip, which is an episode all about sweat, Anthony was having his sweat collected in these plastic bags at the end of his arm, and he forgot about that at the end, raised his arm up, and the sweat came down. But anyways, I think a lot of the clips in our trailer just give you a sense that we're mindful now more than ever that we really need to engage, not alienate our audience. So we're always looking at that balance of how to tell stories in a way that isn't all doom and gloom. They're full of personality and hope and resilience and joy and the power of the human spirit. Sometimes we can even laugh. We also try to tell these stories in lots of different ways, not just through full-length docs that you were seeing there, like True Survivors or Shared Planet, but also short docs like The Bird in My Backyard and our YouTube series, The Nature of Things 101, that asks questions like, is this a crab or is it not a crab? Instagram stories, YouTube shorts. I think that no matter what, none of us should be precious about how we approach climate storytelling. However we can get the message out and engage audiences, we just need to do it. So with that, I'm going to I think throw it to Lisa to ask us some questions.
You think right. Yes. Just for the sake of time, I'm just going to confine it to a couple of questions
Sounds good.
for you, Sandra and Leslie, and I'm going to focus on the questions that came in advance. The first is, can you talk about pitching? There are at least 4 questions that came in about pitching. What's the single most important element you'd like to see in a pitch for a climate-based story? What makes a climate-based pitch interesting to you? What makes a climate pitch something you'd pass on? So if you could just talk about what you want to see and don't for pitching for a climate-based story, that would be great.
I'll start. I would say, first and foremost, we're always looking for stories, not lessons. So not just a big information dump. We really want to see a fantastic story. And I would say in a lot of cases, it's not necessarily going to be overtly about climate change or the environment, but it's really about, how we weave that storytelling through. But I would also say a sense of hope and action. And I mean, I steal that language directly from David Suzuki and the late, great Jane Goodall, who both have always emphasized that hope is action, affirming hope by doing. So, while putting the spotlight on the positive. In terms of what else makes a story or a pitch stand out, I would say a unique, always, and this is the case with everything, but a unique way into telling the story, not just a big broad overview, but a great hook, or be as specific as possible, potentially use humor and other kind of creative ways of telling your story. And then, yeah, I guess just on the flip side, a climate pitch that wouldn't fly for us, I think, would be just something that feels very broad and survey-ish and just too academic and earnest. I think we have to be very mindful of, like, we want an audience to watch this. The story has to draw us in and be, dare I say, entertaining. So find a way to really pull us in to a fantastic story, and then you can tell us some of that information, that more important information about climate change and the environment through that storytelling.
Yeah, and
Sorry.
Just quickly add, all those things that you said that apply. Stories, not issues. We have our news and current affairs colleagues that really do issues. I mean, obviously issues are being addressed through story, but it's story primarily, and characters, memorable characters, layered storytelling. And as I said earlier, like all the other filters and things that we consider. And we're always happy to, you can shoot us 1 or 2 lines or a very short paragraph to say, hey, I'm thinking of this, or I might be able to bring you something unique on this. Is this something you're interested in? And then we can say either, yes, I'd love to hear more, or, oh, no, we already have something in development that's covered that, or we have something similar already. And then, then you can either, send us more or not.
Fantastic. I think I'm going to leave it there. We've got so many more speakers, but thank you so much, Sandra and Leslie. That was really interesting. And now we're going to.
Hey, Lisa, can I interrupt just for a sec? I have a question.
Of course.
Just a housekeeping thing. So a couple people have said the chat isn't enabled. So I just wanted to reiterate, we're trying to use the Q&A function. And if you want to share something, you can raise your hand. We want to encourage dialogue, but we felt that the chat was just going to be too hard to manage. So, let us know if that's not working for you. Let's figure it out, okay, in real time. So anyway, just want to acknowledge we are not trying to shut dialogue down. We're trying to use those other functions. If it's not working, let us know and we'll fix it. All right, thanks. Over to you, Lisa.
And I guess just to add one thing, like it's only me and Liz, so our eyes can only go to so many places. If you have a story that you actually would prefer that I read out as opposed to that you put up your hand and say it yourself, just put it in the Q&A function, just put story beside it, and then I can share whatever it is that you want to share. So just as Liz says, trying to think of ways to make sure that everyone can participate in the way they want to on the fly. So that would be fantastic. Comedy. We're going to turn to comedy and climate storytelling in the comedy space. And now you get to hear from the duo that inspired this whole session, and that is Tracy Jardine and Ryan Camperman from This Hour Is 22 Minutes. Over to you.
Hey, folks. Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for inviting us. We're very happy to be here. I'm Tracy Jardine. I'm a producer on 22 Minutes. I'm a white woman with red hair, and I'm wearing a green sweater today. I'm sitting at a table in a room with my colleague Ryan, and we have a real backdrop behind us of our ensemble cast from This Hour's 22 Minutes and our logo. We're in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which of course is also known as Jabuktuk, which is the Mi'kmaq name for Halifax in Mi'kma'ki, which is the ancestral home of the Mi'kmaq people for thousands of years. And again, just really happy to be here, right?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Ryan Camperman, production coordinator on 22 Minutes. I'm a white male with blonde hair in my mid-40s. I'm wearing all navy today. And over the past few years, I've become more interested and more involved in sustainability. And I just want to say thanks for having us today. And I'm looking forward to share, but also learn with all these industry leaders.
Yeah. So we'll jump right into it. A quick backdrop or background on the series. This Hour's 22 Minutes is a half-hour sketch comedy show that also deals with political satire, and we air on CBC. We are in our 33rd season, trying to catch up to the nature of things, of course. So the content that we deal with is driven by the news cycle and current events and politics and what's happening out there. We mainly focus on Canada, but we will do international reach as well. So the climate crisis is obviously a major headline. And so we look at it through a few different lenses. We tackle things like the political issues that are associated with it, the institutions and industries and corporations that continue to drive the climate crisis. We do look at things like climate skepticism and climate change denial as well. Equally important, though, for us is to relate to our audience. And so we try to address things that they may have experienced, which could be things like severe weather, some of the more negative things, unfortunately, but fires and floods. But we also look at choices that you can make in your life and how to live sustainably and the measures that they may take to help the planet. And that all of that can be driven by different tools that we have available to us. So that could be direct political opinion pieces, or it could be a sketch that is in a location that represents sustainable living. So it could be outdoors, it could be driving an electric vehicle. So we use our props and set deck items as well as backgrounds and actions to present sustainable lifestyles. So it's everything from putting a recycle bin in the office set. Sandra mentioned having the glass of water beside the hosts of Dragon's Den. It is all of those things, those nudges. We do believe in putting those all out there. Our establishing shots often for a sketch could be a house that has solar panels or a heat pump. So we try and think of as many ways as possible to not only represent sustainable lifestyle, but make it normal and desirable. It isn't always easy, though, to talk about an existential, what is basically an existential crisis through a comedic lens, but we try.
Yeah, and using comedy to talk about climate change is a challenge. 22 Minutes does not want to diminish the importance of the discussion about climate change, and yet we must find a way to make our audience laugh. The art of storytelling, in our case, through the comedic lens, is very important right now, especially in these times we're living in. Comedy is a great entry point for connection and creating a comfort zone for our viewers. Through comedy, the message becomes more palatable for the viewer to receive and process the information. People tune in every week to our show, and they want release. They want to laugh, and they want to see the 22 minutes take on certain issues, and one of them being climate change. We're creating culture, and we have a responsibility to spread these empowering messages and stories to our viewers. Through storytelling comes connection, familiarity, understanding, which will hopefully lead to change. And also, it's such a great opportunity for us that we can address the nation weekly through our stories to uplift and also share that they're not alone.
Yeah. As a political satire, it's often very easy to punch up to something or someone that's easily recognizable that represents an abuse of authority or power. And the climate change is such a broad topic. It's difficult to put a face or an individual or a specific company as a target that our audience immediately will recognize. So going back to some of the things that Elsa spoke about at the top, it's finding ways to weave that environmental message into perhaps a broader scope as to what we're trying to do. We do not believe in writing doom and gloom stories. We don't think there's much value to that through our show. So what we do instead is try to tackle it through a comedic voice that still acknowledges the seriousness of it, but can also give a bit of hope. And it's finding those ways to weave it in. We are still exploring our formats. We have a number of different ways that we present information and entertainment to our audience. So we have sketches, we have opinion pieces, we have field pieces, we do interviews. We have a number of jokes that we tell every episode, all of those things. So we have a little quick, I think 45-second run on some of the clips that represent our attempt to address the climate crisis. So if we could run that, please, Natasha.
Climate change is real. We all have to do our part.
Luckily, this afternoon, I was able to carve out some time to talk to some really great activists at the Global Youth Climate Strike.
He wants to return to power and to return us to a simpler time before Trudeau's price on carbon.
Our plan will effectively establish a price on carbon.
Wait, what?
We're thrifting because fast fashion is so out and thrifting is so in. It is far more sustainable and way better for the environment.
Yes, and to prove that anyone could look good in these clothes, we have picked one lucky Canadian to give a makeover to. Colin Mockery.
What? Is that why you asked me here? So no dim sum.
Great. And yeah, so those are just some of the avenues that we do on our show to explore climate change. So one of those was a studio interview with former Minister of Environment and Climate Change, Stephen Guilbeault, a field piece at a climate change rally, and an opinion piece, what we call in our studio, VidWall, about politicians and the carbon tax, and a field piece about thrifting with Colin Mockery that you saw. All of us at 22 Minutes know that comedic storytelling can be very impactful with audiences. It resonates in a very specific way. So every season we try and put more of an effort at getting more of these climate stories on our screen. Working with our writers, we encourage them to take training on climate change, including those sessions that address sustainable production in general, as well as editorial training with Albert. We research and we share articles and videos that address how the climate change is being addressed by other folks through comedy. And we'll share just some of the examples that we share with our writers and crew. I'll just put them in the chat if I can.
Yeah, so we have some links here, but we're happy to share these with folks after as well, if anybody's interested in them. There's a lot of really good comedic storytelling about climate change happening in the United States of all places through late night television. Some really good people doing some stuff there. So some of that's what's there. The other thing that we did this year was put together a seeds kind of list for our cast, our crew, and our writers. And what it is nudges. And there's over 200 suggestions on the list, which include everything from actions and activities we can show, locations we could be using, how to represent clean energy, how to talk about the circular economy, dozens and dozens of items that represent sustainable lifestyle, as well as addressing and defining key climate terms for them to use and a list of green topics. So we feel incorporating key climate terms like greenwashing, the circular economy, renewable energy helps to ground our pieces, and it in some ways can help inform our audience and help them connect the dots to other information that they're seeing. And that's a large part of what we're trying to do, is help them connect the dots, like with them, not for them, but see if we can put some information out there through comedy that actually makes them stop and think and reflect. One of the things about comedy is it can disarm people and make them open and less defensive. So it's a good way to try and introduce an opportunity for them to reflect on how they are dealing with the climate crisis and sustainable living.
Yeah. And through this next section, if you could please just play the slides of stills. So at 22 minutes, we work sustainably. That influences the writers as well as our crew. Basically, we try to practice what we present. The behind the scenes production focuses on the circular economy through repair, renting, repurposing, and recycling. Waste diversion, including donations and composting.
And you can keep rolling the slides and show them as we go. Thanks.
Signage and resource materials like posters every year that advise of our carbon footprint and how it is broken down across the main categories, as well as green memos, green tips on our call sheets, a lending library, and we also have a Dropbox folder that we update with articles and reports. And sustainability is one of the topics that is given consideration in every production meeting. Yeah, so we are a comedy show, but we take sustainability very seriously on and off the screen.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the other things we're doing this year is we've actually reached out to some other comedy writers and producers to see how they deal with the climate crisis and sustainability. And we're looking to see if we can set up a workshop directly for our writing team and any crew that are interested, along with producers, story editors, everybody. And just to, do what we're doing here, share ideas, share experiences, see what works, see what doesn't, and find out if there's some new things that we can bring forward. One of the questions that was submitted by attendees in advance was credible sources. We are not the news. We are comedy shows, obviously, but we refer to ourselves as the fake news. That means that we do try to ground our comedy in reality and then take it wherever we need to for a laugh. So the big thing that folks are talking about is, what are your credible sources? How do we deal with the rise of AI and misinformation, that sort of thing? For us, we think it's really important that you educate yourself about misinformation and disinformation if you are trying to lean into the climate conversation. Media literacy is a critical part of that for us. There's a very robust global campaign of disinformation about the climate crisis. And so you need to be aware of that and be able to identify it and work around it. Who can you trust? You can trust everything with a grain of salt here, folks, understood. But you can trust organizations like the United Nations to publish some pretty clear facts. The IPCC, the World Meteorological Organization. Legacy media, despite the rap it gets nowadays as not being able to trust mainstream, you still can. You can trust the CBC. You can trust MIT, Technology Review. You can trust The Guardian. You can trust AP and Reuters. And then there's a number of websites that are dedicated to talking about climate talking about the resources and information that's out there about the climate change. There are reports that exclusively deal with what misinformation and disinformation is out there. And we have lists of all of this stuff. If anybody, again, would be interested, we will provide it to CBC to share with folks, and you can have a look at it there. I could go on, but I will stop chatting about that now.
Maybe I'll just, because we're just in the interest of time, thank you so much for that. I should note that IOM Media got the Sustainable Production Award from the Academy this year. So everyone's recognizing the incredible work that you do. So thank you, and thank you for sharing it with us. We will, as one question that came in the chat, we absolutely will share every link that we have under the headings of who said it. So absolutely, those comedic storytelling links we'll share. One question that came in was, and I think this will be the only one, and we'll move on. If someone has a story they want to tell, just please put your hand up. But the question is, what are your favorite examples of climate storytelling in film or TV?
What are mine personally? Does it have to be our own show? No, I'm kidding. One of the well, I do think that we've done some really funny stuff. I do. I do have to mention a film, though, that I saw a couple of years ago it's an animated feature film called Flow, which was just gorgeous. And it's about a world that does get submerged by water, and it's all animals, and there is absolutely no dialogue, but it's beautifully done. And if you just want to have a great experience watching a good movie that has an environmental message without beating you over the head, mind you, it's just a really beautiful story. Yeah, that would be mine.
Yeah, probably nature things.
Yeah,
yeah, they're just,
that's true. I mean, it's so well done and trusted. That's the other thing. It's a big thing.
Well, thank you for that. With that, I don't see anyone with a raised hand. Does anyone want to tell a story of their experience in comedic storytelling? What worked, what didn't? There will be the chance at the very end, if there are some stories that you feel unrequited that you want to tell, we can leave room for that at the end. Not seeing anything, just to repeat, everyone who, Duncan McDowell.
Yeah, hi. Does everybody hear me? It's not so much comedy, but it could be considered comedy. It's from the dramatic series Succession, when cousin Greg decides to sue Greenpeace because his uncle gave all of his supposed inheritance, or the inheritance was meant to be his, to Greenpeace, and he decides to sue Greenpeace. That directly resulted in a ton of donations to Greenpeace. So I just thought that that was a nice little um, nugget of insight into the writer's room. And it's funny that that kind of a twist of narrative directly resulted in a climate win.
Amazing, Duncan. Thank you. I mean, it's such a perfect example. It goes to show you it's the impact of the work that you all do, and it does make a difference. So that's a really fantastic example. Not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to turn it over, and that was a perfect segue. Succession being a drama. I'm going to turn it over to Carrie Ferentz and Luis Pollard from Shaftesbury, and they're going to talk about climate storytelling in the dramatic context.
Thanks, Lisa. And hi, everyone. We're here at the Murdoch Mysteries production office, so we're excited to be in situ as we're presenting today. And next door, we actually have Megan, who's our sustainability on the ground person here at Murdoch. So predominantly at Shaftesbury, I sort of serve the role of being the conduit between corporate and production. So the impact of having sustainability messaging coming from the top down is as important as having it from the bottom up when you're on production. So that's been really had some positive outcomes for us as we've been working with Murdoch Mysteries predominantly as our pilot program. So it's been 3 production cycles now, and Megan has definitely been able to instill some wonderful processes, and we're starting to really identify our best practices across the board. But of course, today's focus is on storytelling. And I think the biggest takeaway for us with the piece around in front of the camera and having a green lens is being able to start very early from a corporate perspective of being able to work with the development folks initially to get the messaging clear to the writers' rooms that this is something that we feel strongly about as an important piece within our sustainability initiatives. So with that said, I'd like to hand over to Kerry, who's one of our esteemed writers.
Esteemed.
Yes. Who's going to take us through more of a specific process around how they go about instilling what we've hoped to set up and provide you with the forum to have more impact and be able to have green storytelling front and center when it comes to the writers' rooms, and for it to sort of become normalized so that it's not this innovative new idea. People are thinking about it when they're being given their scripts, that it's something that they know is important to weave into their work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I would say that including storylines about the climate and sustainability is really important to the Murdoch writers. But we don't ever start with that question. I think, people love the show because of the mysteries and the characters, and our loyalty has to be to that first. So what we do, once we have the broad strokes of an episode, so the general story, the crime, the victim, the suspects, is we take a sort of half step back and ask, is there a sustainability or climate angle on this story? And for us, I think beyond keeping the mystery at the fore, what that does is really keep us from being too didactic. I think, we're all aware that shoehorning lessons and morals into stories isn't the way to enact change or get people on board. So we don't ever want to hit anybody over the head with a lesson. And what we've learned that even in a show like Murdoch Mysteries, which is set more than 100 years ago, we're in 1912 now, is that there's almost always an opportunity to include some sort of message about sustainability. I think we actually have a clip from an episode last season to show you as an example. So if we can move over to that.
Detective Murdoch?
Miss Cherry. Hello.
What is that?
It's a solar cell.
A what?
I've created a cell of selenium covered with a thin layer of gold. Actually, I cannot take credit. It has been built according to James Pendrick's specifications.
For what purpose?
It converts radiant energy from the sun into electrical energy. I'll be putting it on the roof, and it is wired here into my office.
Huh. Well, if you figured out a way to get cheaper electricity, I'm all ears. I've actually come here to...
So that scene, as I mentioned, is from an episode last season, written by my colleague Noelle Girard. And that episode is all about a murder that takes place around the launch of publicly owned electricity in Ontario, which actually happened in 1912. And there's an obvious kind of angle right there in the premise, how electricity should be conserved or how it can be consumed. But that's not the tactic that we took. I think it felt a little bit on the nose to us, and we thought we could do something a bit more interesting. So we found a climate-related angle in what I would call the midground of the episode. So Murdoch and his solar panel are part of a runner, 5 or 6 scenes, that's connected thematically to the episode, but not narratively. And I would say over the last 3 years, which is how long I've worked on the show, that midground is where we most often locate our climate storytelling. And we do it often. I was on location yesterday just outside Hamilton, and we were shooting a scene about the loss of animal habitat as development increases in urban and suburban areas. And that too was happening in 1912. So plus ça change, as they say, I suppose. And sort of using that lens, we can scale things up or down based on the needs of the story. So we think about it as midground, foreground, or background. I think there's a little bit more information about that on our next slide if we can kind of move forward. So some stories, there's a fairly famous episode from long before I was involved, certainly, about electric cars, I think back in season 5. That would be an example of a climate story or a sustainability story in the foreground of an episode. And then I think we find even sometimes during prep and on the floor ways to build in examples of background climate storytelling. So that can be anything from Murdoch riding his bike rather than driving a car to people using reusable water bottles on a show like Hudson and Rex, which is another Shaftesbury show. So overall for the writers, what I would say is that it's about applying that sustainability lens to kind of every aspect of the piece and going from there. It is very rare that we can't find something in an episode, be it in the foreground or more in the background. I think we may have one more clip actually, which is from our sister show, Hudson and Rex, just to give you a sense of the ways in which we try not to be didactic. This is just a bit of a fun example.
Where's all this bee knowledge from?
Well, I've been giving some thought to retirement and what I might do afterwards. And I love honey.
Rex does too. I can't even sweeten my coffee without him wanting a bit.
Yeah. And it's also something that's really good for the environment.
There is another perk. You're this investigation's personal hive mind.
Rex, let's go.
We love a pun. What can I say? So that is it for us. Or do we have some questions, Lisa?
Well, you actually answered one of the questions that came in, which is how you deal with climate storytelling in a historical show. But here's a question I've got for you. Shaftesbury works with all sorts of different broadcasters. How do you obtain sign-offs from studio network directives and get broadcasters on board?
I'm on the Producing for the Planet Steering Committee, and for those that aren't aware, there's about 100 signatories now within the organisation that was created and spearheaded by Marsha Newberry. We'll be hearing from Angelica later on today. And also individual producers can sign on. So don't feel that if you're not with a large company or you don't have productions every year, feel free to check out the website there. We can add that to the info at the end. But I think one thing that strikes me with that question, Lisa, is how can we create standardized mandates so that when production companies are talking to funders, broadcasters, what have you, that everybody's on the same page? Because I find at the moment already there are layers where there are subtle differences when it comes to mandating sustainability initiatives. And is there a way that we could move forward within the industry as a whole to create a level playing field so that whether you're a small, medium or large production, you know what's expected going in? And I think that would really help support incentivizing sustainability practices, because people are aware what they need to think about very early on in pre-production, rather than being caught on the fly towards the end without having that in place, particularly when it comes to the inception, and I know CBC have mentioned it, of mandating certification with Albert, because that can really catch out some production companies if they're not prepared.
And I would just add to that, from the writer's position, and I'm not saying this just because we're in a CBC sponsored panel, we've never received any sort of pushback or notes on our sort of climate and sustainability storylines. If anything, it's, can we add to that? Is there another scene to this story? That sort of thing. So that's really, it's a lovely kind of relationship that we have there.
And I think one last thing that I know has been bandied around quite a lot, and I actually just spent some time with Susan Kirby from Screen Producers Island, and talking about the connection between tax credits and sustainability. So that's a conversation that a lot of people would love to have. But what's the formula? How can it be introduced in a way that, again, won't disadvantage producers from those very lucrative tax credits, but also serve as a great incentive for the industry to take advantage of those dollars?
Fantastic. I think that's probably it for questions. Let's see. I'll hold some back if we've got time at the end. Just on your feedback about broadcasters, um, happily, I'm also the chair of Canadian Broadcasters for Sustainability. So I'm going to give that a little bit of a think, like what role could that group of collection of broadcasters play in trying to manage expectations? The broadcasters across the system are so different in size and scope and what they want and their resources, but I think there's probably something that we can do to help. So I've taken that one on board for sure.
Yeah, it sort of plays into like funding drawdowns where those subtle differences with requirements just become problematic because you think you've got it all the ducks in a row, and then it's like, oh no, we've missed that key element.
I totally hear you. Fantastic. Well, thanks to both of you. That is just amazing. I am now going to turn the floor over to David Way, who is the CEO of Great Pacific, and he's going to talk to us about factual entertainment storytelling in the climate space.
Thank you, Lisa. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for organizing this, Lisa, Natasha, and others. It's really obviously important and inspiring to actually be together as a group talk about this. I'm fortunate to lead Great Pacific Media here in Vancouver. Part of my focus is obviously the shows that we make, but really the development of what we're doing and try to get these kind of messages in where we can. Also very fortunate to work closely with Marcia Newberry, who was just mentioned, in addition to the stuff that we do and the content behind the scenes and aspects of the programs and how we make them. Just a little bit about myself. My background actually comes from chemistry and biochemistry. I studied all of that and got into environmental programming at the very beginning with Lauren Green's New Wilderness, and spent about the first decade of my career doing a lot of docs and shows environmental programming in the 90s, when you could say it was a little bit easier back then in some regards. And since that time period, our approach has been try to find the ways to weave it in organically into our stories as we go along. If you go to the first slide for me, please, just to speak to some of our approaches. I'm going to run through a couple of our shows and show you some examples, 3 examples. We're well known for deep access series, long-running series like Highway Through Hell and our new one, Rocky Mountain Wreckers. The reason I wanted to touch on these a little bit is that in this world, we work with characters that are every day dealing with the issues front and center of climate change, things that are happening in the mountain passes and all of that. So we look to embed these organically into their challenges in the stories. It's an interesting challenge in many ways to do it. Sometimes opportunities come up to dive in a little more deeply on it. And there's an example if you go to the next slide, please. Thank you, Natasha. A couple of years ago, there was events of atmospheric rivers here out on the West Coast that took place, and we decided to actually really focus on that, worked really closely with our broadcast partner, Bell, and how we could tell a story about this and try not to tell it from the doom and gloom point of view. A lot of editorial conversation about that. It's really interesting how this worked out. It ended up being a limited series that focused on the event and then what you could do about the event afterwards. So I think I'll play the clip, but I do want to play the just signpost that this was a lot of editorial discussion about this clip. This clip was used partly to promote the series. It's the After the Storms clip, please. Thanks, Natasha. Yeah.
Around the world, storms are getting bigger and more destructive.
My life was in danger.
As the planet warms,
Look at how high that water is.
severe weather is becoming the new normal.
How it's gonna come, we don't know.
Just crazy. On the west coast of Canada, an unprecedented storm unleashes catastrophic flooding.
We had no idea what was coming.
Oh my God.
Affecting hundreds of thousands of people.
There's no safe travel.
Look at the amount of homes down here.
This used to be our home.
From the coastal mountains.
This is unbelievable.
To the valley floor.
Devastating.
It's hard to put into words.
Thanks, Natasha. So you can see that that clip really takes sort of an approach that here's the event and here's how big it was, but the series was really about the what are we going to do about these sort of events afterwards and what kind of long-term solutions and planning you can get into. But we were really trying to piggyback on the wide appeal of Highway Through Hell and that world and appeal to that core audience as an extension through that. So that's why you see elements like the voiceover that uses the same narrator as Highway Through Hell. It's an example of real people and characters that were going through something and adapting to the events as they were happening. Obviously, those atmospheric rivers have happened year after year out here. Just quickly go to the next slide for me, please, Natasha. A couple of our other series, Dead Man's Curse on the left there, and High Arctic Colors, which we did with the CBC a few years ago. They're examples of series where we are in deep access in remote locations. Dead Man's Curse takes place in the mountains behind Vancouver. High Arctic Colors, obviously up in the high Arctic. And at points in the making of those stories, we deal with the fact of climate change organically. The glaciers are retreating, what's happening in the high Arctic. We worked really closely on the series with different First Nations also to make sure that we were getting the accuracy of the stories that were involved there. Dead Man's Curse is about a legend that goes back 120 years. So, and people have been going up into these mountains for that period of time. So we were able to show the retreat of the glaciers organically in that series and weave it into that. High Arctic Colors, it's probably a good idea to run the clip in a second for that, but it's deep access story about an amazing French-Canadian company, Degagné, that's been around for now 160 years, and they've been delivering goods into the high Arctic for 60 years. So there were places within the series where it was important to discuss and get in the issue without being too on the nose about it. One of the great things that we were able to lean into is one of the central characters, Captain Duplain, had been going up into the high Arctic for over 20 years and experiencing the change up there. So short little clip here, about 30 seconds to give you an idea of what that was about.
I've never seen ice at this period of the year. In this region, you have to take it seriously. Very, very seriously. Most of that ice is ice that travels from disintegrating glaciers in Greenland, and that came over the currents. I'm positive it's global warming.
So there was other points in that series where we were talking about how the Northwest Passages opened up more, but that was a bit of a surprising aspect to it all about how the retreating glaciers and the breaking the glaciers were making it very, very difficult to get the essential goods up there. So we wove it in that way. And then other parts of the series, just going back to Degagné and the deep access we were thrilled to be able to highlight that I'm sure I've got this right. They were the first company in the world to create and have built specifically a battery backed up based ice-breaking delivery ship that runs on LNG and battery up into the high Arctic as well too. So it's also ways to show how people are doing things in different ways. An incredible, I think it was a 15-year development project for them. So that became part of the series as well too. And then I think the last thing we want to talk about is, if you can just go to the last slide, Timber Titans is a little bit more recent example. This is a series that we do out here in British Columbia. Again, deep access. It's a series on forestry practices out here in BC. And we went through some significant changes on this to try to address some of these issues. And again, a lot of this comes back to the original development idea and the pitch and the casting decisions. Here we were trying to present relatable characters and storylines in a world out here where they're adjusting to the behaviors that are happening with the environment and innovating along the way with it too. The series focused on different companies. One was a European-based technology company, Freya, that's operating out here in British Columbia that uses low carbon footprint and selective logging practices and amazing, really changing the game out here. Another was a First Nations community forestry project that we're looking at, obviously, all their forestry lands as a long-term, sustainable. Let's make sure it's going to be here for future generations. And then another company we focused on, based out of Vancouver Island, really interesting. Going to play a little bit of a clip of them in a second, but really interesting company that does selective heli logging. And I'm a guy that actually went and worked in a logging camp for a year in Haida Gwaii to pay for university. And what this company does is goes around to all those old logged out areas and pulls out trees that have been down on the ground for anywhere from 5 to 100 years. And then they do really low carbon footprint. They don't have to build any roads, anything else, just selective lobby, like lifting the trees out of the forest as they're going. Part of this series, obviously, we had to deal with the forest fire situations, deal with it a lot on our different shows. And we look to weave that into this series specifically. And that's the clip I'm just teeing up right now. Natasha, if you could show that one, please. Thanks. Yeah.
2023 is officially the worst wildfire season in BC history. Over 2.8 million hectares of forest have already burned.
Middle Lake was part of the Hell-Raving Creek Fire, one of the largest of the 2023 season. After burning for more than 5 weeks, the flames finally subsided 8 months ago.
This is still good timber. There's nothing wrong with this. It's charred on the outside. That's it. The more burnt fiber and burnt trees we harvest, the less green stuff gets taken.
There's another clip I was going to show, but for sake of time, I won't. But it's related to this story, and it's really interesting as well, too, because not only is this company taking the wood that's already been burnt down, they're actually turning it into biomass. And that biomass is actually used to feed the electrical grid system out here and create other products. So it's an example in the casting process and the access process where we're trying to find ways to appeal to the audience that likes this show, global audiences that like these shows, and weave those sort of themes into it. And just to speak to something, one more thing, just this last slide, great, something that we're working on that I think speaks to the evolving nature of relationships with networks that are all concerned about this as well, too. This is a project that we have in deep development that's about the halibut fishery here in British Columbia, which is considered to be the gold standard, basically, of sustainable fishery practices. We've been working very closely with National Geographic Society on this series. And as many of you may know or have had the experience, National Geographic Society go hand in hand with you to make sure that you're going through all the right practices and why should we put this series on air. Lots of discussion with the brand, the National Geographic Society, directly going behind the scenes to say why we're doing this. And we're hoping to be able to bring this series out in the next year or so. So those are some examples of some of the things that I wanted to talk about. And I guess I will throw it back to you, Lisa.
Yeah,
really
back to
thankful for the
me.
opportunity here. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a question just as we see whether or not there's anyone who wants to share their own experience. So if you do, just as a reminder, put your hand up. I'm going to ask you a question about the source material. A few questions came in on that front. How do you cut through the current climate of disinformation and misinformation? How do you find and connect with factual resources which use the latest scientific information? And then finally, with the rise of AI, what's the best place to find reliable scholarly information on climate and sustainability? Do you have any thoughts on any of those questions? How do you find the facts and not the fluff?
Yeah, exactly. Well, as I mentioned, I come from a background in sciences, so it's really important in everything that we do. It's having teams that are journalistic by nature, double checking things without a doubt, going to the reliable sources. Some of them were mentioned before, verifying the sources. When we work with our First Nation colleagues, we have a cultural and heritage monitor on board, and where we're dealing with things sensitively there, making sure we're double checking that. Don't rely on AI, don't rely on ChatGPT. It's really challenging in many regards. You can get misled by the sources there. So checking your sources as you're doing that. Again, I just mentioned we work closely with CBC before and National Geographic Society. There's people on board there that have jobs to doubly check everything, so that's really helpful as well too. In the age of YouTube programming and all of that, that's where you have to be super concerned, without a doubt. I think it really comes down to the core, the team of people that are on it, making sure that you're doing the due diligence on everything, because the social media backlash is real and it should be there and holding us all accountable and all that. So there's lots of reliable sources that still need to be checked, without a doubt. As a person that came up through sciences, that was part of our deal all the time. Multiple references, multiple back checks, making sure it's right.
Fantastic, David. Thank you. So we're going to turn the floor now over to Kevin Eastwood from Optic Nerve Films, and he's going to talk about documentaries and climate storytelling. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Eastwood. For the accessibility description, I'll just describe myself. I'm a white male in his 40s with black hair and a beard, and I'm in a room with a painting or a picture called Blue Planet, fittingly, and a painting of flowers. And I'm wearing a green checkered shirt, which hopefully complements my green eyes. So I have a background both in scripted and drama, but also in documentary. And that's what I've been mostly working on in the last number of years. I've produced a handful of feature documentaries directed by other people, and then I've directed my own documentaries, and more particularly, I've directed a number of documentary series. And climate awareness and climate change have kind of been fairly present in a number of the stories I've told. On the feature documentary side, I've produced a number of films with director Charles Wilkinson. And a lot of those films have all been on environmental themes, and not necessarily always climate change, but I often think climate change is just kind of a placeholder for talking about anything to do with sustainability or the environment or any number of issues that are all kind of part of a larger umbrella concept. But like a lot of people have said here, I always find even in documentary, it's important not to do an info dump. I know Leslie used that term, and I liked that a lot. You have to still fall back on the main building blocks of any motion picture, and that's characters and story. And so I always see documentaries that are about environmental themes or climate change. You really just need to be using something else as a delivery mechanism for any of those themes. I heard a broadcaster just tell me at a meeting last week that she finds too often in the documentary space in particular that filmmakers come to her with a topic, not with a story and not with characters. And I would say that is an important thing to hear. I think more documentary filmmakers should think about that. And, just to give some examples of the ways we've tried to do that sleight of hand of using a story or characters to be a delivery mechanism for other climate change related themes. One of the first film I worked with Charles on was called Oil Sands Karaoke, which was about oil sands workers competing in a karaoke contest in Fort McMurray. The foreground was just the contest itself, and that was a way to kind of get people caught up. Contests, sports, movies are always it's a common theme in movie history. It's an easy thing to have as a structure, and yet it'll also allowed us to seed some ideas of what was in the background, what actually was represented by what they did for a living. We made a film called Haida Gwaii on the Edge of the World, which was all about how the people in Haida Gwaii, which those that don't know, that's an archipelago off the coast of northern British Columbia. I know David just referenced working up there. And that's a community that's half Indigenous and half non-Indigenous, which makes it somewhat unique in Canada or this region, in that it's right on the line. And the entire community works together to live sustainably there and thinks constantly about how to protect the land and the waters for the next generation. So the film is ostensibly just about that one unique place, but really it's a microcosm for the rest of the world. And that the delivery mechanism was kind of virtual tourism. Years ago, I remember when I first worked at the Vancouver International Film Festival, I remember hearing from somebody in the leadership that one of the main things that why film festivals do well is for a lot of people, they represent an opportunity for people to see places and cultures they otherwise wouldn't get to. And that's really true. I think a lot of people that came out to see Haida Gwaii on the Edge of the World at film festivals and in theaters, we did do a theatrical release, were coming to see this place that they'd heard about. Most people even in British Columbia, never mind Canada, haven't actually been to Haida Gwaii. It is kind of prohibitively expensive to get to, but it is this amazing, beautiful place. And so people, I'm not going to fool myself. They were coming just to see kind of a form of virtual tourism. But then what they got was also the environmental commentary that was included. There's characters like a woman who constructs solar power installations to help wean the island off like fuel oil being trucked in. You see other people living in other examples of just a more sustainable way of living. Uh, and that film was a success. Like we actually made some box office in theaters, relatively speaking, for a Canadian movie. We did quite well. We won the top award at Hot Docs. So it showed there was definitely an appetite for that kind of a film. But yeah, we kind of lured them with one thing and then you give them something else as well. And then we also made a documentary called Haida Modern, which was a biography about legendary Haida artist Robert Davidson, whose work reflects a lot of environmental concerns and a lot of the same themes as Haida Gwaii on the Edge of the World, namely how Haida people have been considering how to live sustainably as just a cultural tenet of a way of life for millennia. And that can be generally broadly looked to as inspiration for how we all should be living. And then in my own series work, I did a documentary series about so-called British Columbia called BC An Untold History, which was looking at the somewhat lesser known or untold stories of British Columbia from a more diverse and inclusive lens. And the last episode was dedicated just to kind of the history of environmental and climate activism. So we spoke to activists, community leaders, elders, knowledge keepers, and we looked at kind of the causal link of how, certainly Indigenous activism was an inspiration for the founders of Greenpeace. Greenpeace was started in Vancouver, and before they did their first anti-nuke, the trip to Amchitka, they were really inspired by Indigenous activism. And so we looked at how that, and then that moved on to saving the whales. And we also looked at how, we wouldn't have had the War in the Woods, the so-called War in the Woods, or the protests in Clayoquot Sound in the 90s, were it not for the protests in Haida Gwaii at Atlee Gwaii, Lyle Island back in the 80s. So that too was using the delivery mechanism of like kind of a fairly action-packed history series. And hopefully people got caught up in that energy, even if they, weren't necessarily people who would want to sit down for, environmental activism lesson. And then most recently, I've done a documentary series called Wildfire. And that's about the people working on the front lines of wildfire fighting. We saw some clips in David's last reel there of the summer of 2023. And that was when our documentary series takes place, which was the worst fire season on record in Canada. And yeah, we'll show a trailer from that.
If there's any time you needed that siren, it's right now.
BC has never experienced a fire this enormous.
It's now one of the largest ever on record.
In firefighting, there are no unimportant jobs.
Depending on what my tactic is with the fire, we've got a bunch of different options.
We'll release 20,000 pounds of water in 3 seconds.
Nowadays, every fire is the big fire of the season compared to what it used to be.
For those months that I'm working in fire, it's just all consuming.
We had massive fire tornado.
Fatigue is real. It's not something that we just power through.
But this is a dangerous job, and despite all our efforts, sometimes the worst can happen. It was a terrible day.
Just making sure you know there's an evacuation order.
I ran out, it just felt hot. Everything was black and on fire.
The guy working next to you just lost his house, and he's still here fighting fire.
Sometimes you feel very powerful, and sometimes you feel very powerless. But it also feels really good. You kind of put it all out on the line.
So yeah, as you can see, we were afforded incredible access. We were embedded with the BC Wildfire Service in a way that very, very few other people have ever been allowed. And that too is a show that's like you're embedded with the people working on the front lines. And we don't actually talk too much about climate science, yet it's in the background of every single frame in that show. And that, at once upon a time when we were conceiving of the show in the original pitch materials that we prepared, we did plan to have scientists speak. We had like a who's who of the best scientists in this country and elsewhere who were going to give some of their take and commentary to allow people to kind of, give a context to what they were watching. And we realized very quickly that that just didn't work, that it was really disruptive to the main dramatic action, but also my story editor, Daniel Pierce, made a comment that and here's one lesson of how to make things is hire people that know their shit, that know the realm. As a showrunner, I don't know all the topics that I ever tackle, but I hired people that were like and had knowledge that was deep and wide about the area that I was working in. And Dan is one of those people. He's a great film person, but he also, this is his bag. And so he was able to cite reports that talked about how, anybody that's still skeptical about climate change in 2025, they're not going to respond to any scientists, any arguments that you put forward. However, there is data that supports that people working on the ground, the average blue collar frontline worker, those people will actually get their comments will get considered. So we decided to put it all in that basket and just rely on our characters talking in the way that they do about what they say. I mean, climate change is probably said maybe 5 or 6 times in the entire series, and yet it's also present. And I think it works. And we were monitoring some of the commentary that was happening on Facebook groups and stuff, and we would see people who otherwise probably wouldn't have watched a show that was about people working the front lines of climate change, but they were watching it because it was people working the front lines of wildfire prevention, and so that worked. So that I saw as a successful tool. I'll move to the questions, but I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I want to add about wildfire. Wildfire was also unique that we had to get like approval from the highest levels of provincial government to get to do the show. And so we were very fortunate to work with Knowledge Network. Knowledge Network were our partners, you saw, and they that was helpful because since we were getting access from an arm's length government ministry, that they wanted to ensure that their constituents, British Columbians, would have access to the material for free. If they're going to say yes to any show, the fact it was something that would be available to be streamed or watched by any British Columbian was important. It wasn't as important as whether it was seen widely or anything like that. So that was tailoring our broadcaster to the project in order to facilitate access. And the fact they're commercial free public broadcaster was a big point because we had these conversations with like the Premier's office that it would undermine our commentary if we were cutting to a Ford F-150 or a Synovus commercial every 12 minutes. So that was a big part of it, was that there was no commercial aspect to it, and that gave us that access. And yeah.
Super. Well, that's incredible. Love seeing those images. I love, not love seeing those images. They're so powerful. Here's a question that came in. How do you bring people who don't care about climate change into watching? Do you have any advice for people?
I mean, that was
side?
the special trick of wildfires. A lot of people who lived in rural communities were watching it because, look, everybody's affected by wildfire now, and certainly everybody in British Columbia. So people who probably wouldn't, Knowledge Network said they had a lot of signups from communities that they didn't have before. So I know just the subject matter themselves. And a lot of rank and file, wildfire fighters are not necessarily, they're not the same type of person as, say, an academic or a climate change activist. So that ensured we had people who were tuning in sometimes for the specific kind of characters we were portraying. And yet I think it led them to some thinking. We know that people were probably, a lot of people that work in that job, it is just a job. But the people that we profiled were people that are particularly articulate and inspiring, and I think kind of sowed some of the seeds of ideas that we'd want people to think about. And if people watch the whole series, I'd say one of the big takeaways is that not all fire is bad, and that's what we that was one of our themes that we wanted to embed in the show, is that the idea, the Smokey the Bear attitude of all fires are bad and should be prevented. That's actually an antiquated colonial mindset that was preventing the harvesting of wood because, preventing, they didn't want the forest to burn down because they wanted to cut them all down so they could sell it. And so when you actually unpack how we've been managing forests, which hopefully the show kind of expresses, there's reasons to take a lesson from how Indigenous people have been stewarding these lands for millennia, which is allowing some fire.
So just as a reminder, if anyone has a documentary example they want to share, I'm going to ask Kevin one last question, and then we're going to turn it over to our next speaker. But if you do have a documentary example you want to share, just put your hand up and I'll call on you. Do you have any practical ways of incorporating climate telling into micro budget or low budget productions?
I mentioned Dan Pierce, who my story editor. Dan did a great documentary called Trouble in the Headwaters, which is a 25-minute film about how some of the flooding that you saw in some of David's clips there, that was, a product of climate change, yes, but also forestry practices. And he had done a couple of shorter films, one of which went viral. He made a YouTube film that, yeah, went legitimately viral. And so he decided that he had kind of like figured out this unique angle of how, what those floods were caused by. And so he did this great piece, and he did not have a lot of money for it, but he got some foundation grant money. And that was tied to the fact he had to have like a partner, some kind of outlet, a news outlet. And so he partnered with the Narwhal. And so Narwhal didn't actually give him any cash. I don't think he'd mind me saying this, but they were his like media partner. And so they were game to then put it out, and they reach out to all of their subscribers, and that was great for him. And he made a really strong 25-minute film that is now, he's just done a big tour. The Narwhal was sponsored their first screening and has been also promoting all their community screenings. And he's had a lot of success just getting out to a whole bunch of communities with that film. And I spoke to him this morning just to check in, because I had a couple of questions if I was going to speak about it. And he said, he'd do it all again. Like, obviously, it was a micro budget film. He didn't make any money really from it, but it was a success. And it's traveled and brought together a lot of grassroots advocacy groups in those more remote communities. And I think that's a real effective tool. So looking at foundations, looking at unconventional means of support to make a micro budget documentary about climate awareness is a way to do it. But being clever of thinking, okay, who can put it out there if not a broadcaster? In this case, the Narwhal, and that's been hugely successful for him.
Thanks, Kevin. So now I'm going to turn the floor over to Catherine Winder. She is the CEO of Wind, Sun, and Sky, and she's going to talk about climate storytelling in the kids space.
Thanks, Lisa. And thank you, Liz and Natasha, as well, for organizing this really important conversation. I'm learning so much. And hi, everyone. For accessibility, I'm a Caucasian female with brown gray hair. And today I'm really excited to tell you about future chickens. So something very different from what you've seen so far. Natasha, you might put up the slide if you don't mind, if you've got that there. It's Future Chicken is a multi-platform climate literacy mission for kids. And it started as a partnership between my company, Wind, Sun, Sky, which is a next-gen content studio, and we're based in Vancouver. And we have teamed up with Clearwater Futures Foundation, which is an educational charity based on Lake Simcoe, Georgina, in Ontario. And it was founded by Annabelle Slate. Some of you may know her. She was the original publisher of Owl and Chickadee magazines, nature magazines for children. And together, we've built Future Chicken, which is a story world that invites kids into the adventures of a time-traveling chicken. You can see her right in the middle there, and her planet-protecting friends around her, who journey from present day to 2050 to demonstrate how small actions today can build a sustainable tomorrow. So cause and effect. And the foundation of this project is based on a deep conviction that when it comes to children and climate change, there's nothing more powerful than evidence-based, positive storytelling that'll inspire change and a connection with nature. So I thought I'd start with telling you a little bit about why this came about. You can go to the next slide. I'm sure everyone knows children represent 25% of the world's population and 100% of all of our future. But given the prevalent doom and gloom messaging that we've all been talking about here, it's in the news. By the way, 97% of articles out there typically are negative when it comes to climate and the environment. Kids face an immense challenge with echo anxiety, a sense of hopelessness and fear about their future. And so we've done a lot of research. We've spoken with children themselves and identified a big need to create climate content that isn't just about everything that's bad, but rather positive, solutions-based stories about what is and can be done to make a difference. And we believe that media filled with humor and joy has the power to help young people imagine a positive future. And most importantly, what this mission is all about is strengthening children's sense of agency and optimism. You can go to the next slide. And we've been really fortunate to have some visionary partners like the Shaw Rocket Fund And kind of what you've been talking about, Kevin, we've had a foundation funding us called the Temerity Foundation, and we've been able to launch this innovative digital first mission by going to where kids are today, which is on the multiple screens, but with the goal to bring them out into the real world and nature. But rather than me talk about it, I'm going to let you meet Future Chicken herself, and she can tell you what we've been up to.
Hello, humans of the present. I'm Future Chicken, your eco-friendly, anxiety-crushing chicken of tomorrow. The climate is changing. Glaciers are melting faster than an ice cube in your iced oat milk latte. And kids are having a tough time. That's where I swoop in. Along with my friends, the Planet Protectors. Yeah! Here's the deal. I'm not just a chicken with a cause. I'm an entire multi-platform universe filled with comedy. Ugh! Am I a mushroom? I'm everywhere Gen Alpha is. YouTube? Cluck yes. Instagram? Oh, I've got memes and reels for days. TikTok, viral dances, and eco tips. And Roblox? Oh, you better believe it. Join me, because you and we can build a better world one pixel at a time. Look, I know what you're thinking. Why is a chicken doing this? Some humans created these challenges, but I'm here to help you and the next generation fix it. I'm giving them hope, humor, and a ton of ways to take action. Also, therapy chickens are very expensive. So if a chicken can dream of a better future, so can you. Future Chicken out! Stay clucking awesome.
All right, go to the next slide. And Future Chicken is about 18 months young right now, so it's very, very nascent, but we've got big, big ambitions. You can go to the next slide, Natasha. And you can see on the next slide, there we go, that we decided to go big right from the start. And we've launched, as I said earlier, on multiple platforms, with our primary platform being YouTube and YouTube Kids. And we've also worked with CBC, Knowledge Network, and many other partners to get our content out there. And we've got animated series, shorts, podcasts. We've also launched with a Roblox game. And we have a dedicated learning website, and we've done live events and more. And all of the content that has been created to date and continues to be created is being written to be uplifting, evidence-based. And the idea and strategy is that we're not just talking about climate solutions, but we're sharing important lessons and learnings to inspire conversation, curiosity, creativity, and real-world action for kids. I'm just going to share a little clip from one of our videos. You can go to the next slide. It's called Three Sisters. And here, Future Chicken and Planet Protector Bello the Mushroom are going to talk about Indigenous learnings for a sustainable crop ecosystem.
Bello, why are you calling this the Three Sisters?
Well, in this mini ecosystem, each plant provides something the other needs.
Neat.
The beans feed the soil, the squash leaves prevent weeds from growing, and the beans climb up the cornstalk. And together they provide most of the essentials you need to stay healthy.
Whoa, amazing. Did you come up with this?
I'm smart, but not that smart. It's actually a brilliant technique used by Indigenous North American women for centuries. It is a very spiritual part of their culture.
I love this.
All right. I'm going to go to the next slide.
Hello. Why are you calling?
So one of the things we did from the very beginning is interconnected all of our Future Chicken stories with the themes and goals of the UN SDGs. And to that end, each one of our main planet protectors, you can see Future Chicken there, Percy the fish, Bello the mushroom, Frittata the egg, and worm. They all have thematically linked goals to their area of storytelling. So every single one of them has multiple strands of stories. I'm going to share one example, and Future Chicken represents water, and water is life. And I'm going to go to the next slide here. We have one of our projects is called the Future Chicken Today Show. And in this show, we use our Unreal Game Engine technology, where we can bring an animated character to life and do a live cartoon to human being interview. And so we brought in all sorts of eco-inspirers, including luminary environmentalist Catherine Hayhoe. We've got Drew Scott. We've got Anishwar Conchella. and many, many more. And each provide learnings and takeaways that kids can do to make a difference when it comes to the future of their planet and the planet. So one of our guests was Autumn Pelletier. You probably know who she is. She's a Anishinaabe water rights protector and advocate for water. And here's a little clip from one of their conversations.
How old were you when you realized the water in a neighboring community was undrinkable?
I was 8 years old, and at the time I was attending a water ceremony in this community, and I ended up having to use the washroom. And of course, you wash your hands after using the washroom, but in this community I couldn't.
Wow, that's so hard to imagine. What did you do?
So at the time, my thinking was, well, there's kids that are my age and much younger who have no idea what it's like to drink water from their tap. They've never experienced that. And for me, that didn't sit right, and it made me want to speak up and use my voice.
I just love this interview. The fact that an 8-year-old took the reins like she did. She's just such an inspiration for children. And speaking of children, children have led the way on our Future Chicken journey. To start, they actually came up with the idea and concept for Future Chicken. And as we've grown, we've taken a test and learn approach to our digital storytelling, from using their feedback to pivot the content as we go, even shape our character designs. We look at analytics. We also go into classrooms, and we've hosted live events where Future Chicken is on the screen real time, talking to kids, asking them questions. They can ask Future Chicken questions about what's actually happening today in the future based on things being done today. So it's really, really powerful, but we get to learn from kids what's important to them, makes a difference in their life when it comes to the environment. Anyway, in all of these things, we're encouraging kids to express, create, and lead in as they go. Let's go to the next thing. As like Ryan and Tracy, the 22 Minutes team, humor is really key to our success when it comes to helping kids digest climate solutions. And here's just a little example of one of our clips.
It's a little early for me, 11 a.m. But what do mussels have to do with clean water?
Why, they're nature's water purifiers. In fact, Future Chicken, mussels can... Excuse you, Future Chicken. You're on camera, dear.
Oh, that wasn't me. I was just standing here.
Denial doesn't look pretty on you. Anyhow, I was saying these mussels are doing a lovely job cleaning my water.
Amazing. And they just seem so happy to be...
Excuse me, sir. Did you just eructate in my habitat?
It's a little...
And finally, we lean into social media. There's lots of little games that are on different platforms that kids and parents can co-play together. So there you go. There's Future Chicken. There's a lot more to it going on, but you get a sense of it.
That's clucking awesome. I'm going to have to remember that one. That was a good one. I'm going to ask you one question because we're sort of winding down, running out of time. You know, when it comes to the kids space, one of the questions that came in was, how do you navigate the contradiction of combining scientific truth of climate emergency with the need to produce hopeful content for children?
Well, we really feel it's important to provide hopeful, positive information. And there is so much out there that is happening that is good. That said, we want to be authentic and acknowledge that it isn't perfect right now in the story. So we're walking a very careful line in terms of weaving in the comedy, the evidence-based science and information and the stories and the takeaways. There's always a learning takeaway in every one of our little shorts, long or short form. But we believe it's important to give them hope and positivity and not scare them. There's too much fear out there. They've got enough pressure.
Thanks. Is there anyone who wants to tell a kid's climate story in terms of their experience? Just as you're thinking about that, I'm just going to read a comment that came in about documentaries. Sue Bealey says that she points us to a documentary which Story Money Impact worked with The Interceptors, which is a great example of efforts from community on food rescue and preventing food from decomposing, creating greenhouse gases in landfills. So thank you, Sue, for that. I'm not seeing any other examples and being mindful of time, I'm going to turn it. So now is a few minutes for unstructured time. If anyone has a question or an example they want to come up with, please raise your hand. But I will just turn it over to Angelica Siegel, who is with Producing for the Planet, that's going to talk to us about a resource which Producing for the Planet is working on in terms of climate storytelling. Angelica.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you, everybody, for these very, very interesting presentations today. I'm here from Producing for the Planet. We are, in case you don't know us, we're a coalition of Canadian production companies who have made a formal commitment to take climate action both on screen and behind the camera on their production. So I'm happy to say that almost all of the speakers here today are a part of the coalition. It's great to see everyone, and thank you for continuing to share the work and the efforts that you're doing. One of our missions at the coalition is to really advance these peer-to-peer knowledge sharing moments. They're really, really effective, at least for our producers, to see how climate action is kind of rolling out in different ways across different productions and across different genres. In ways that make sense for each individual production and ways that are manageable and motivational for the team. So these are kinds of the things that we talk about with the coalition and with our producers and members. So great to see everybody here. We're really excited. I'll be quick on this one. We're really excited to share that together with CBC, we're co-developing a storytelling masterclass for 2026. This will be aimed at writers, producers, directors, anyone who influences story content, and it will be designed to give tools to integrate climate and the environment into their stories in ways that resonate with our audiences. It's going to cover scripted, kids and animation, factual, documentary. It's going to be genre agnostic, and we're really excited to be putting this together. And thank you, Lisa, for the support so far and the wonderful ideation that we've had so far on the course development. The course is also supported by Shaw Rocket Fund, Blue Ant Media, and Accessible Media. So we want to thank those groups, and we're really excited to do this work and provide our industry, producers, writers, directors, storytellers, a next step to advance your climate storytelling capacity, and tell these stories in meaningful and inspiring ways. So what we've all learned today, if you're feeling motivated and inspired and thinking about what you can do next, please stay tuned from Producing for the Planet and CBC for the climate storytelling masterclass coming next year.
It's going to be incredible, and it's breaking ground because it's the first English Canada course. So it's fantastic that there's no one else that could take this on. Producing for the Planet is really so perfectly positioned to lead that work. So I can't wait to see how it all turns out. We have a few minutes before I'm going to turn it over to Liz, just a few. If you have comments or questions that you want to make, feel free to just put up your hand. I wonder the first question that came in, I did pose it to the 22 Minutes team, but does anyone else, whether or not you're just a speaker or in the audience, have an example that is your favorite of climate storytelling on film or TV? Was there anyone who wants to bravely step forward and share a good example that inspired you in addition to all of the amazing ones we heard? Kevin, thank you. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. A dramatic film that I've always thought tackled environmental things without it being necessarily foregrounded, but was just a really compelling and great film is Aaron Brockovich. Steven Soderbergh film, Julia Roberts. It's ultimately got a lot of stuff to say, but it relies on great characters and story and excellent direction and excellent acting to deliver it. So I think that's a high bar. And I'm blanking on the name. Dark Waters was a film a few years ago that starred Mark Ruffalo that was all about DuPont and Poisoning of Waters in the States, and that too is an excellent film. It didn't get much attention for some weird reason, but it's a fabulous. Those are two of my favorite like dramatic feature films that ultimately have a lot of environmental messaging. You just don't realize it.
Fantastic. Anybody else wants to jump in with what their favorite is? Not seeing any. Feel free to send them in. We'll include them
Angelica
in the...
has one.
Oh, Angelica, good for you.
Just put my hand up there. Common Ground is a documentary that I think came out last year on Netflix. It was a follow-up to Kiss the Ground that had come out a couple of years prior. I love Common Ground because it weaves together a lot of interesting climate issues that I personally care about, with regenerative agriculture, soil health, nutritional health, and kind of how these stories and really like community stories as well. So it's a informative and a really feel-good documentary that I've heard a lot of people reference, and I've personally enjoyed it. So I wanted to share that here.
Amazing. All right. With that, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Liz to wrap us out.
Thanks, Lisa. And I'll just do this really quickly. We did want to do one more poll. I don't know whether we have time, Natasha, but so one thing we wanted to ask was, is there one specific action you will take on your next project after today's discussion? This would be really cool if you could fill that in really quickly, and I'll just keep talking because we're running out of time and we don't want to keep you over. So a couple of things. We're going to share the video of the session. Please share it with other colleagues or people that you think will be interested. We're going to share the takeaway document with some of the links and information that people shared today. I want to thank all of our participants. They did an incredible job, and especially want to thank CBC for being such a great partner, to Natasha and to Natalie, but also to Lisa for her leadership, not only in pulling this session together from a conversation, but also for her huge leadership role in this space.